Hey guys, today I thought I would finally catch up with the season and recommend you some creepy reads for Halloween. Now, I don't really read horror, and I think that most of these recommendations are going to be more along the lines of creepy classics, but I do really enjoy novels with weird psychological twists where there are characters with kind of perverse intentions and motivations, and I think that you'll find that most of this list reflects that. Getting into the recommendations, I just want to get the most obvious one out of the way, and that is, of course, Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. If you somehow don't know what this is about a young doctor named Victor Frankenstein who gets a little bit mad and a little bit overconfident and creates a monster out of recycled human body parts. This is going to be on most people's Halloween recommendation lists because you have your mad scientist, you have your monster, and there you go, Halloween. Though what I personally found creepy about Frankenstein was not the actual monster, but was more the twisted human qualities that led to the creation of the monster in more ways than one. Another author who's going to be on a lot of recommendations lists this time of year is Edgar Allan Poe, because he's kind of the guy that you think of when you think of creepy short American fiction. However, I would also like to recommend you guys Nathaniel Hawthorne. Hawthorne wrote in the early Puritan colonial phase of American history, and because of that, he deals with a lot of Puritan fears like original sin and the idea that there are only a select number of people who are predestined to make it into heaven, but just in case you are one of those people, you have to be really, really pure and well-behaved and a true believer and resist sin and temptation along the way. I've read several of Hawthorne's short stories over the years, so I can confidently tell you that most of them are very creepy, so you can pretty much pick up any short story and any collection that you can get your hands on and you're pretty much good to go. But I do have a few specific recommendations, starting with Young Goodman Brown. Now, Young Goodman Brown is probably the stereotypical creepy Hawthorne novel or short story because it deals with a young man who has to travel through the woods at night on his own and his encounters with some less than average beings along the way. Another Hawthorne short story I would recommend, especially if you're a fan of Frankenstein, is called The Birthmark, which deals with another overly brilliant young scientist who has a love interest with a strange birthmark that may or may not have mystical properties. And finally, I would recommend the short story Roger Malvin's Burial, which deals with a body that has to be left in the woods and what happens when the young man who promised he would return for the body never does. Now, as long as we're talking creepy short fiction, I would also recommend The Turn of the Screw by Henry James. This is a novella about a young governess who goes to take care of two children at a house where creepy things may or may not have happened in the past. If you're like me and you think that there's already something sort of inherently creepy about children, you're really gonna like this story. And if you, again, like psychological themes, there's a lot of weird stuff going on between the governess and the oldest child that she's watching, which is a boy who you kind of get the sense is possibly going through puberty and probably way too old to have a young female governess. Another thing this story does really well is that it's told from the perspective of the governess, so you're not really sure what is actually happening, what she's imagining, or even worse, what she's making happen herself. I also don't think you can ever go wrong with reading some original fairy tales around Halloween, and I'm not talking like the Disney version or the for your kids version, but I'm talking the original Grimm or Christian Andersen fairy tales, because they're all very gruesome and very creepy and perfect for this time of year. Another novel recommendation would be Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, which is of course about the young girl named Jane who is orphaned as a child, goes through a series of tragedies, and then finally becomes a governess at Thornfield Hall under the supervision of the very mysterious Mr. Rochester. There are several creepy and fairly gothic moments throughout this novel, starting in the Red Room and then going to the surprise Mr. Rochester has in his attic. But again, what I find most creepy about this is actually Mr. Rochester himself and what he is willing to do to get what he wants. For a more recent release, I would suggest The Resurrectionist by E.B. Hudspeth, and this is again about a doctor that goes a little bit mad. Dr. Spencer Black was the son of a grave robber, and as he grew older, became obsessed with the idea that humans actually evolved from mythical creatures, and people who have abnormal bodies or mutations like extra fingers or toes or who are conjoined twins, he's convinced that people like that are a little glimpse into that evolutionary process. So he starts running a series of experiments and basically tries to recreate the mythical creatures he believes we evolved from. Now, what I think is so great about this book is that, one, it's really, really creepy. Like, the writing is really creepy, but there are several illustrations in here where he has tried to basically recreate the physiology of different mythical creatures, and if you're looking for something both creepy in story and in ambiance, I think this is exactly what you're looking for. And lastly, I have a real contemporary read for you guys, and that is Fight Club by Chuck Palaniuk. I'm not going to talk about this too much because this is definitely a psychological novel that you don't want to spoil the twist on, but if you've seen the film, you know that this is craziness embodied, and I would highly suggest you read the book if you haven't yet already. It takes you even deeper into his head than the movie does, and it was weird, just to say the least. So those were all of my recommendations for creepy Halloween reads, and if you guys have anything you would like to recommend me, please feel free to leave them down in the comments below. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you are having a good day. I hope you stay safe, whatever your Halloween plans are, and I will see you next time. Bye!